well.
All righty, we are on the air, and I'll speak more slowly so that all four of us can get up here. We're going to be talking about the wastewater treatment plant cost update. And whenever you have to have a meeting to discuss the updates, that usually means something got more expensive.
Certainly has in this case.
If you wanted to further introduce the topic.
Sure. As a little bit of background, Commissioners, I'm sure you're all aware that the wastewater treatment plant update has been on our radar for years now. We have cost estimates dating back to 2016, and Martha and the design group will get into greater detail, but this comes out of both the plant being outdated as well as permit requirements from the Kansas Department of Health and Environment having to meet those, something that we've been planning for quite some time, both from a cost estimating and water rate perspective, as well as we've previously authorized commencement of design work. So design is nearing completion, cost estimating is nearing completion, and we are getting down to the details of the cost, how to pay for it, and how to proceed. So with that, I will turn it over to Martha, and I think she'll be sharing this presentation with others.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Martha Tasker, Director of Utilities. And with me today, I have Jessica Adams-Weber, and she's with HDR. You've seen her a time or two before on other projects. She's our project manager for the owner's representative services, which in turn means she acts as an extension of our city staff and does the duties that we don't have enough staff to complete. And then also James Grenier, he's with Black & Veatch. He's the design build manager, and he's been involved with the Design Build Institute of America, the agreements that will hopefully be our next step to bring towards for you, and developing the guaranteed maximum price. So as we go through this today, I'd like it to be as conversational as you would like it to be. If you have questions, ask them at the time, or if you need additional information, just step right in and bring it up so that you don't forget at the end. Sometimes presentations with numbers and dates are harder to remember than just straightforward words and pictures. So please feel free to jump in. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. In our presentation today, we're going to talk a little bit about the project scope, how our project and our team structure was put together over time. Then we'll move into how we've engaged the bidding market and the process that we went through, ultimately getting to that cost that Mike referenced might be up. And we'll talk about the market volatility, what part of it's escalation, what we're dealing with currently with the supply chain, and talk a little bit about our schedule, what the design builder's next steps are, funding options, and how this fits into our rate structure. And then ultimately at the end, we'll look for some direction from the City Commission as how we move forward. Next slide, please. I don't know if my pointer is really going to be, I think you can see it on there, but in general, our wastewater plant was first constructed in 1926, upgraded in 1948, 1961. Those kind of fall in line with Schilling Air Force Base. Then a large upgrade in 1993, and belt filter press building in 94. So this plant has been out there and functioning for about 95 years. There is one structure left out there, and it's part of the, I don't know if my pointer is still working. It's part of the digester. It's right under that title, and it was there in 1926. So the way our plant works, the flow comes in to the headworks area, and then the solids are split out in the primary clarifiers. The liquid portion travels through our activated sludge, final clarifiers, a UV building, and then effluent aeration, and then onto the Smoky Hill River. And then the solids basically are processed in our digester complex, which we'll be doing some major rehab to. And then ultimately, the biosolids are placed on farmland for beneficial use. Next slide, please. So, again, our wastewater plant is addressed as 596 North Street. It's out on the very northeast side of the city, on the riverside of the flood control levee. Constructed in 1926, our current design capacity is 7.25 million gallons per day. We see roughly around 4 million gallons per day, and over the next duration of time, we've developed a concept and a plan that we will ultimately be able to reach our full 7.25 over time when it's needed. Our last upgrade was in 1993. It was for ammonia removal, and that process will not meet the requirements for nitrogen and phosphorus, which Mike alluded to, changes in our effluent requirements. Also mentioned our discharge permit. We receive it in 5-year cycles. In 2005, we had a schedule of compliance to complete a study to see what it would cost to add total nitrogen and phosphorus to our wastewater treatment plant process. Then in 2010, we started monitoring for that prior to the Smoky Hill River. 2015, the KDHE did a pilot study to see if we could add chemicals or do anything that would really cost effective to meet total nitrogen phosphorus. That was not successful, so when we got to our 2020 permit, which runs from January 1st of 2020 through December 31st of 2024, we had a compliance for new requirements. Next slide, please. And I'm not going to go through this in detail, but all of those numbers that you look on there for the total nitrogen, they've given us a milligram per liter and then pounds per day as an annual average, meaning that's rolling over a 12-month period. The majority are goals, but the limit that's important to us is 606 pounds of nitrogen on an annual average. And for the phosphorus, similar, we have a goal, but what's important to them is that we don't discharge more than 60.6 pounds as an annual average limit. And that's what we're tied to in our current permit. And it has dates of completion by the end of December of 2024. We've talked with KDHE about those being extended due to some of the conditions we're seeing with the supply chain and completing the project, and we had a slight delay getting started with COVID. So we do have a meeting at the second week of December to talk with them more about where we see the schedule based on the cost and what we see for supply chain issues to kind of finalize all of that with them. So, but we've been keeping them on board with all of our project meetings. We send them the PowerPoint and they attend if they choose. So they're very well caught up with where we're at today. Next slide, please.
Martha, one question.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, that percentage or concentration, is that better than what we take in for drinking water, or?
Well, these really aren't so much the limits that are in drinking water. I wouldn't describe them as the same.
Or
limits.
not drink, but I mean the water we take in out of the river to turn into drinking water. In other words, do we put it back better than we got it from the people upstream, or?
I'm thinking about that. We do have some impairments in our stream, upstream in the Smoky Hill River, so I would say in some cases we're putting back better water quality because nitrogen and phosphorus are typical in agricultural products. So depending upon where you would sample, you could see higher limits in there. Would you agree with that, Jessica? That's going to be my short answer without going into a long total maximum daily load and long discussion, but yes.
I'll just say a quick thing. So the EPA establishes total maximum daily loads that the state passes down to each point discharger, the city of Salina. And so the intent is that you're improving the water quality ultimately that reaches the goal. Yep.
All right, thank you.
But the total maximum daily load is the process that KDHE goes through that tells us what to do, and they had completed all of that process.
What is the primary generator of the nitrogen and phosphorus that we produce?
The at our wastewater treatment plant?
Yeah.
The source would be domestic waste.
Well, that's all I could say is what we see coming in through our domestic wastewater, through our industries, any of those flows that come in. And our total nitrogen, we're in the 50s and 60s for the influent coming into our plant. Phosphorus, and we got to take that down to 10 as the calculation is based on, and phosphorus, we're in the 7 milligrams per liter
Well, is
entering
it
our
just-
plant and leaves at 1. So it's in the domestic sewage.
But
Or
it's-
industrial
It's
sewage.
just part of what's, comes out of treating sewage?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's what we're removing to clean it up in our river, so ultimately, when it gets to the Gulf, as Jessica mentioned, it's not nitrogen, phosphorus that grows the algae and creates the depletion of the oxygen.
That was a very nice dance around what you wanted to say, but
It
you knew
is
you
what-
didn't want to say on TV, but I appreciate that.
And just to be abundantly clear, given the way the questioning went, it's not in the drinking water that we
No,
send out of the
nothing to
plant.
do with the
And
drinking water.
it's gathered in the waste that we receive, and then we have to get it out at that point.
So I was tactful trying to make that sound
You did a very good
as
job.
best I could without getting too deep. So basically, in our current project, we have biological nitrogen removal, and that's going to occur for the most part in our existing activated sludge basins with new basin layouts, some work in the blower building, and some electrical changes. We have 3 final clarifiers currently. We'll build a 4th final clarifier, and the existing final clarifiers will be rehabbed. We have chemical feed for the different removal of nitrogen and phosphorus. We have ferric chloride, polymer, and then a few modifications to our odor control system. One of the big improvements is to our digester complex. It was built in the early 90s, and doesn't currently meet all the National Fire Protection codes of today, so some major changes there. Doing some work inside the existing building. We are proposing a new boiler building to meet the National Fire Protection codes. The existing sludge gas building will get new gas handling equipment, and then the 2 primary digesters will get new covers and rehab the tank and equipment there so that they're up to service. So in general, that's kind of a high overview of the work that we'll be doing with all the mechanical and electrical that goes along with that. I can see a question coming.
It's more logistical. I think
Okay.
we'll get in the weeds, so
Okay.
I'll let it be.
Okay. Well, we'll be glad to take a shot at it.
Well, I think what it comes down to is I need to probably get a tour of that plant.
And we
better-
would love to give you a pre-tour and then a later tour at one time to see what's changed. So that'd be great.
Fantastic.
Can kind of walk you through there's a lot of work that we have spent being able to keep the existing plant in operation and make these modifications as to which basin and how we reroute the flow and what we do to keep everything in operation. So logistically, whenever you rehab an existing plant, there's challenges from that, and then there's also the challenge that you can't see everything. Some of it's covered up with dirt or concrete or inside a structure. So there's logistics down the road. Does that help you a little bit with the
Yeah.
question and how the flow travels through the plant?
A little bit, and I think the nomenclature as well is something I probably could use some polishing up on, so.
We're not quite as many acronyms as a core, but we're close. We just had a core meeting a while back, but we do have a lot of acronyms. If there's anything that don't make sense, like GBT is a gravity belt thickener building. And
Thank you.
if you took a tour, we'd be able to kind of walk you through, and then you'd have a physical look at those buildings. So it would be helpful. We do have a lot of acronyms, so please jump in and ask questions. So next slide, please. And talk a little bit about how our project was put together and our team structure. Over 2 years ago, we came to the City Commission and discussed following the same process, similar to what we did at the South Water Treatment Plant when we did the work out there, which was progressive design build with an owner's rep, and we carried on with that process. With this project, we're looking at a guaranteed maximum price, and due to some of the inflation and supply chains, there's a cost share that goes along with that for savings, and I'm going to leave that good news for James to talk through that. Is more detailed in his presentation. We have completed the Phase 1 portion of the work. Phase 1A was developing a basis of design report, and we did that so that we would know exactly what we're going to build. So when we got the engineering fee for that project, we knew where we were headed. And Phase 1B was then to continue on with the design and develop the guaranteed maximum price. And that's the point we are at today with our next step, to be moving into the construction phase and completing the Design Build Institute of America standard agreements. As mentioned earlier, HDR has been our owner's rep for this project and has been involved through every step and every meeting. And typically, it's not Jessica, she's the person that got the short straw to come today, but whenever we're on a call, we'll have probably from HDR anywhere up to 8 to 10 people. And the same with Black & Veatch, only since they're doing the bulk of the heavy lifting and we're kind of reviewing it. I've seen times when we've had 15 on a call. So all of the disciplines and everything, everyone is pulled together for these very strategic meetings. So a lot of time and effort has got us to here with input. Black & Veatch, they're contracting as Overland Contracting Incorporated. They're the entity that does a contracting portion for these type of projects as a design builder for Black & Veatch. Welders and Morgan Construction is included as part of the Black & Veatch team. In the early 90s, Welders and Morgan constructed the 1993 plant upgrade. At that time, it was about a $13 million project, and at that time, that was really a large construction project for the city of Salina, for anyone in our area. And Welders and Morgan completed that project, and still to date, there's some of the individuals at Welders and Morgan that are still involved in this phase of the project. So a little bit of carryover from there, and myself and Mark Peterson were also a part of those projects back then. So we do have some institutional knowledge of what's on the site for some of the existing equipment and structures. But again, 20 years later, sometimes things might get forgotten. So at this time, I'm going to pass it off to James with Black & Veatch. He's going to kind of walk you through all of the process that we've went through to get to the costs that we're at today, the guaranteed maximum price. And Jessica with HDR may jump in and out as part of that presentation goes along to talk about the HDR experience and what their involvement has been in these numbers, so that we can hopefully be as transparent to the efforts that we put together to date. So I think as you go through, I know James and Jessica, if you have questions, just ask those and we'll try to address them as we come to that part. So, James?
Okay.
I don't know if you need the pointer.
No, I'm
stuff's
good.
pretty
I'm
straight.
good. Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. So as Martha said, I'm with Black & Veatch. We're the design builder for this particular project. And as Martha mentioned, we've been developing the design. Well, we started out with the BODR in the very beginning of 2020 and developed the design. So taking that through to earlier on this year. As part of the process of determining and establishing the price for the project, we also went through a process of contractor outreach, engaging the market to see who was interested in bidding, who was available to work on the project in the local and regional market. So in May of this year, we went out with a request for intent to bid on the 12 subcontract packages that we pulled together. And we reached out to over 50 local or regional contractors in the area, and we posted the request on the city website. And it's really just to gauge the level of interest from the bidding community. And think it's fair to say we got a mixed response. The market currently is extremely busy. Labour is in short supply, and so subcontractors, contractors tend to pick and choose a bit more than they would have done a few years ago. We had a mixed response. Some packages we had really good coverage. Some packages we had a pretty limited response. Some of the main packages like the civil, the concrete, the process mechanical, piping, that kind of thing, was very limited. We had Walters Morgan who were interested because they knew about the project and they've been working with us all the way through, and I think one other. And the one other wasn't a contractor that we felt was a viable option for this particular project. You know, we have to look at the skill set that those individuals have. So that gave us a very good picture of what was out there and enabled us to come up with a plan going forward to as to when we actually went out to bid. So the bidding process, next slide please. The bidding process itself, once we developed the design to 90%, so we're nearly complete, and we've got the comments from HDR and the city on board, we pulled the packages together and went out for bid in August of this year. And we gave the bidders about 3 or 4 weeks to respond, answered their questions, made sure that they were interested, made sure they had everything that they needed. And then once we received those back, we'd assess those for technical compliance, commercial compliance, and then just make sure that we've got apples to apples comparisons between bidders and against what we really, really want. So we got that pricing in around about the end of August. Next slide, please. So in terms of those packages, just to give you some idea of the outreach that we had on the equipment quotes, this is more sort of purchase orders, buying pumps, mixers, those kinds of things. We had 17 equipment packages that we put out on the street, and we went out to 90 bidders. Initially, what we do is we call them and say, are you interested in bidding? And 83% of those bidders came back and said, yeah, we're interested in bidding. We actually received 50 quotes, so 50 out of the 90 that we sent out. So that's a 56% quote rate, which is kind of how things are in the market these days. You know, vendors and subcontractors can pick and choose. Some of those packages were sole sourced. The clarifier, which is the large round tank mechanisms, we went to Westtech only because we're refurbishing existing clarifiers which came from Westtech in the first place, so it made sense to go to them only. Similarly, with vertical mount mixers, the city had wanted to run with a particular type of mixer, and again, they really only come from one particular vendor. And then the linear motion mixers, there's a clear market leader in that technology, and that's kind of who we went to. But all of those packages were competitively bid, and we got at least 2 bids back on every other package. Next slide, please. So in terms of subcontract quotes, again, we had 17 RFP packages that we sent out. We went out to 45 bidders. Again, 82% said, yeah, we're interested. And then we get 18 quotes. So that's a 40% quote rate. A number of the packages were sole sourced to Walters Morgan. Now, because we'd already done the market outreach, we determined that there really wasn't anybody else that was interested in bidding on those packages. And what we did with Walters Morgan was said, okay, we're going to go to you alone, but you've got to be fully transparent. We want to see details of your estimate. We want to understand how you've built up your pricing. We want to understand where you've gone to get quotes for concrete, for pipe, for rebar, all those things, so that we can assess and make sure that we feel confident that they've come up with a true market price. So when we receive that back from Walters Morgan, we go through it, we vet it against our databases and our expertise in the market. HDR also took a look through it as well as part of their due diligence. So when all's said and done, in terms of the purchase orders and the subcontracts, all of that construction cost, around about 96.7% of that construction cost was bid out to the market. So it's not based on numbers that Black & Veatch come up with. 96% of it, 97% came from the market. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So, the important bit. This is a summary of the costs that we've developed, and in the yellow section, that's the price that we've come up with as of September of 2022, and that price holds true today. What we're showing here is the development in, or the movement in cost from the very beginning of things when HDR produced a feasibility study back in 2016. That was based on that gave a number of the $31.5 million. At the basis of design report stage in May of 2021, we sat at 33.9, and that was really before the market went crazy. There'd been some escalation. I mean, we're talking about a difference of 5 years, but not anything like we're seeing currently. So then at the 60% design stage, which was around about a year ago, we saw that number increase to 37.2, and then and again, some of that pricing information is based on Walters Morgan's numbers because they've been working with us. Some of that's based on our budget numbers and so on. But it's really only at the guaranteed maximum price, when we truly test the market and see what the market will give us, that we see that the number comes in at overall a $41.6 million. So it's an increase of 22.7% against the BODR. So it's an increase. You know, that's a substantial increase. What I will say is we produce estimates, and we do design build across the states. We've seen projects, particularly in California, which is a whole other world in many respects. We've seen price increases on projects from 40 to 60% in some instances, and it's really just to do with timing of when you priced it before, when you at what point you're pricing it now, and kind of gauging things on that basis. So really, the increase in cost is due to the market. There's escalation in the market. There are shortages and so on, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. So we produced a very detailed estimate. I think it was 4 binders full of information, all of the quotes, all of the cost build-ups, everything that we produced to go into that estimate was shared with the city and with HDR, and then the city and HDR have spent time over the last 2-3 months reviewing that information and fielding a lot of questions to us. How do we come up with this? Where's that number come from? And so on. And we've kind of reached this point in time. But again, the price that we've got is based on the markets. What the market is telling us is the price for the project. Okay. Next slide. So this.
So I might just add one quick thing, just so there's an understanding of the role of HDR and Black & Veatch in the city together. So the benefit of the progressive design build model is that the design builder has a contractor and an engineer team together. We supplement like an extension of staff, so we're extra engineering powerhouse behind Martha. So at each of those steps shown in the previous slide, that shows each of the times that we received a cost estimate from the design builder. At that GMP, that was really a day-long meeting where we went page by page by page through all of the cost estimates, and then we were allowed that additional time to review it. So those back and forth questions are based on our equal expertise. We also have a cost estimating team, so we compare what we're seeing in the market as a global engineering firm to make sure that the costs that are provided to the city are accurate and at least what would make sense for that either equipment or material or service as a subcontractor. So it was a very in-depth process throughout the life of the project.
Yeah. Thanks, Jess. So this graph, there's a lot of information on here, and it's probably difficult to read, but really what we're trying to do is depict what's been going on in the market in terms of cost escalation. And really the only thing that I want to convey is that, and this is based on PPI, producer price indices. The key thing to get across is that the dark green bars are what happened in 2010, the increases in 2010 to 2020. The light green bars are what's happened in the last 2 years. So you can see that what's happened in the last 2 years in terms of price increase across all of these commodities is in most instances outstrips what's happened in the previous 10 years. It's gone crazy. It's like nothing we've seen for a very long time. And as I say, we're seeing projects that are increasing in cost by 40, 60%. So it's having an impact. Next slide, please. So in terms of market volatility, what does it mean for this project? So obviously, as I mentioned, there have been all sorts of impacts due to COVID, what's going on in Ukraine, down to a ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal. All of these things have had a ripple effect, and we can see it in our everyday lives. There are two parts to this that really impact the project, and so I'll talk about both of those. There's escalation. There's the cost impact of shortage of labour in manufacturing, all sorts of things that drive the pricing of commodities and equipment. So in order for us to deal with that on this project, we're carrying around about $1.275 million of contingency to cover that escalation risk. And that equals about 3.6% of the project price. And that really is to cover us from the period of when we got pricing in at the end of August through to when we will start actually, or when we'll be buying out the job, which is anticipated to be February, March kind of time. The plan basically is to buy this job out as quickly as we possibly can so that we mitigate that escalation as much as possible. So we have a pot of money to deal with that because we know that the costs are still increasing. That 3.6%, I mean, if you assume that covers a 6 to 8 months of escalation, that's actually a pretty aggressive number compared to where we see the market generally at the moment. We're seeing it anywhere in the 8 to 10% band, but we feel confident that we can do that.
So
Now,
you're going to start buying the project out in March of next year?
if not sooner, yeah. So assuming that we get the go-ahead on the project by the end of the year, then we've got to finish the
Locking in
design.
prices.
Yeah, finish the design and then go buy
Okay,
the job out.
what's NTP stand for?
Oh, notice to proceed. The notice to proceed.
Very good.
As soon as Martha says go.
Okay.
Really, it's when the city commission
Yes,
tells them
yes.
to tell you to go.
There's a chain of authority
Yeah.
here. So Black & Veatch is taking on board the escalation risk as part of the guaranteed maximum price. So that 1.275 million sits within our guaranteed maximum price. Basically what a guaranteed maximum price is it says we will not spend above a certain limit, or it will not cost the city above a certain limit. If it costs us, if we find the cost goes over, then that's on us. So we have to foot the bill for that, unless it's because of something that is a contractual mechanism, such as a change event or a change order or that sort of thing. So that deals with escalation. There's another impact that is probably a tougher thing to deal with, which is market delays. What we're seeing be much more problematic than cost increases is basically vendors telling us, you can't have it when you thought you could have it. You can't have it when we said you could have it. And so we're figuring out plans to deal with that particular risk. So we're carrying another amount of contingency, $673,000 to deal with that. And again, we're taking that risk on board. That's our risk to deal with and manage. And again, part of that is we're not going to push to go to site and start spending money on having a site team there building the job until we know what the lead times look like. So again, we're going to push to buy out the job as quickly as we possibly can, but we're not going to rush to site at that point. Now, if we find that a vendor says, well, we said the lead time was going to be 30 weeks, and we get 15 weeks into it, and we're on site, and they say, well, now it's going to be 45 weeks or it's going to be 50 weeks. That contingency is to allow us to manage and mitigate that risk. It may mean that we need to be on site longer. It could even mean that we need to demobilize and remobilize, but we'll be doing, we'll be figuring all of that out in very close concert with HDR and Martha and her team to make sure that we do what's best for the project, to be as judicious as possible with the funds. We're doing other things as well to figure out exactly how to mitigate these risks. Particularly, there are risks with, we see a lot of market delays associated with electrical equipment. So we've put plans in place to establish temporary electrical supply, if needs be, to certain pieces of equipment, certain systems, so that we can get those up and running and make them operational, and then we can come back in with permanent equipment. So there are a number of things that we can do.
If materials and components are available right away, is there just going to store them somewhere, store them on site, or?
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of space at site to store a lot of materials and commodities. If we can get them sooner, we're not gonna wait. We'll get them to site and store them. Yeah.
So I was just going to add here, market volatility is a subject that every community who's undertaking major capital projects is encountering. And even if you were doing a design bid build, you'd be seeing this on bid day, where your contractors are pricing this volatility into their costs. And so the benefit of this method is that we're able to understand what potentially the cost impacts of these could be, or what we anticipate them to be as to large engineering firms, what we're seeing across the country. And then further, and James is about to get into this, is how do you manage that risk? Who owns that risk as part of the project, and how do you cost that in? And so through that negotiation of the contract, we've been going back and forth about where does it make sense, who has most control to mitigate that risk and make sure that it's in the right bucket and we're pricing it accordingly. So I just wanted to add that piece in.
Thanks. Essentially we own the risk. Because we're in the position of being able to manage it and mitigate it and do whatever we can. Now, we need funds as part of that, and that's why we carry these contingencies to deal with it. So essentially, and the numbers that we've come up with, the 1.275 million and the 673,000 are based on our assessment of the cost associated with it. The escalation risk, we have a third party that provides us with a lot of escalation information, and we run a model that basically runs through a whole slew of iterations of what could happen, and it spits out a number that says this is how much the model thinks you should carry. So there's all sorts of clever ways of pulling that information together. But so essentially, that's how we're planning to deal with and manage those particular risks. If we go to the next slide, we've been discussing what the contract would look like in order to reflect the ownership of those risks and how we manage those risks. And next slide. So we've been talking about the contract and been talking about schedule. So the contract is a guaranteed maximum price, and what we're proposing is a 65. So that hopefully there will be an amount of savings if we don't spend all that escalation money, if we don't spend the contingency on market delay, or we make savings in other areas. Hopefully there's a bucket of money at the end of the job. The idea is that we split that savings on a 65-35% basis. So 65 comes to Black & Veatch, 35% goes to the city. Now that you might ask, well, why is it not an equal split, or why is it not in favour of the city? The reason is that Black & Veatch is taking the risk on those particular issues, and in terms of delivering the project as a whole. So we felt it appropriate to skew the numbers in our favour slightly. But by sharing savings, it means that we in the city are aligned in terms of our objectives for the project, which is to save money and deliver the project as efficiently as possible. because if we do that, you save money, we save money, and it makes for a successful project. There's no sort of us and them in the whole thing. The contract itself is based on a standard template. It's from the Design Build Institute of America, and there are some city modifications that have been made. We're very close to getting that contract finalised. It's a very, very widely used contract in this particular market. In terms of the schedule, Martha touched on the fact that we're talking to KDHE about the schedule for completion of the project. It is going to go longer than KDHE had intended in terms of their permit. But we've had some initial conversations with KDHE, and we don't foresee any problems with that. They're very understanding of the conditions with COVID and everything else. And what we've done is we've built the schedule to reflect what we think are the appropriate levels or appropriate lead times based on the equipment lead times that we've been given as part of the bidding process that we had in August. And then we have some float in there to deal with some of these market delays so that we can flex and deal with those accordingly. So based on a notice to proceed of the very first of the year, we would be substantially complete by middle of October 2025. We're expecting to achieve the total phosphorus compliance, which is one part of the permit, in June of 2024, and total nitrogen is expected something around about May 2025. And so we'll have conversations with KDHE on that basis to make sure they're fully aware of where those dates sit.
I'm going to look at city staff. Did we do the water plant? Did we do the guaranteed maximum price also?
That project ultimately was lump sum. We had a lump sum from the design builder, and there was no cost share or guaranteed maximum
Because I couldn't
price.
remember
Lump sum.
having this split on any cost savings or anything.
And the situation was a little different when we did that project. The market delay and the escalation weren't as much, so it was, the contractor felt more comfortable giving us, the hard number. So, but at the end of that, there was still many weeks behind the scenes of us discussing the costs and going through their estimates to determine where we were, but slightly different this case.
Is this type of project specific enough that there's only certain contractors that can actually work on this type of project, or is it the equipment that's actually specialized and a larger number of contractors could actually do it?
I think there's the market, as James mentioned earlier, there's a lot of projects out right now, and there's a lot of risks and different situations that come into play, so they have to pick where they think their best alternative is. And so the equipment, I don't believe there's anything that's really unusual or special. Jessica or James could answer to that, but I'm not aware of anything that's really unique, and so I don't, it's really the market at the time.
And we're being required to do this to bring our facility up to a certain standard. Where are other communities at? I mean, is this standard? I mean, for all
Probably
cities?
both working with several communities right now on
Yeah.
this nitrogen phosphorus situation.
So it goes back to the EPA doing those total maximum daily loads dependent on the waterways that you're discharging your wastewater into. The Kansas Department of Health and the Environment is setting compliance standards for most point sources. So most communities in the state of Kansas are in a compliance agreement with KDHE to get their effluent quality to a nutrient removal. So removing that total nitrogen and total phosphorus.
So we shouldn't feel like the Lone Ranger.
Oh, no.
Okay.
And that goes back to a lot of the projects around the state. There is a lot of wastewater work happening right now in the state. A lot of those communities are trying to either improve their liquid side to meet the nutrient goals or their solid side to manage the biosolids that are resulting from their process.
And if you don't meet those standards, I take it there's significant fines?
So yes. The compliance schedule is set, just like with your ammonia limits that you faced, what was that, back in I can't
We have
remember.
molybdenum
Yeah,
from the
yep.
biosolids.
Yep, so there's a lot of different schedules that the state will implement for each community. And yeah, if you don't meet those compliance dates, you could potentially face fines.
And Martha can speak to this more specifically, but we've also been putting off improvements and replacements that we would have done kind of in the normal course of things, knowing that this was coming. We were trying to incorporate all that. So we've let the system age a little bit as we've prepared for this major upgrade.
And really to maybe add a little bit to that, you notice we started talking about the wastewater plant in 2005, and that the river basically went dry in 2006. And in working with KDHE, they knew that we had all of these projects in play. Salina was a large community that was drought prone, and they thought that was probably not the best place for us to be in if the river truly went dry, which we've seen a few times since then, or not completely dry, but would have had we not mitigated. So they were the ones that talked us into moving forward, or suggested that we move forward with the water treatment plant as opposed to the wastewater plant. And in talking about the total maximum daily loads, they have done that by kind of your river basin, and tried to put everybody together to be successful from all the different on our river basin, and then the Republican and onto the east all have different, they've all had different time frames that they have these requirements for, and they're typically in your 5-year permit time frame. That cover what you wanted, Mike? Okay. Other questions? Or James, we didn't let you talk about how
That's
many
all right.
things you're doing,
That's quite all right. I don't have much more to say, I don't think. So next slide. So as far as the next steps for us is to finalize, the first thing we've got to do is finalize negotiations on the agreement terms, and I think we're 95% of the way there. And assemble supporting documents, pull it all together, basically tie a bow around it, and then ultimately seek City Commission approval on the agreement, and then go build it. That's essentially what
Commissioners,
we have to do.
one thing I'd offer as an observation is we've talked about kind of the market and this contract and the guaranteed maximum price. The thing that Martha and I talked about at great length and that I had placed focus on was the 90% plans going to market. You know, the concern in any guaranteed maximum price is the accuracy of that amount, and whether how conservative it is or how much cushion there might be in it. I think the 90% plans are indicative of what the market was. So then the next thing I looked at was the inflation factor from when those bids were solicited to when we might be under contract. And it felt to me like 3.6% in these times as not being overly conservative in favor of Black and Veatch as the guaranteed maximum price contractor. That seemed pretty dialed in, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Okay. I'll hand it back to you, Martha.
Next slide, please, Scott. So now we're kind of down to the nuts and bolts of how do we pay for this project. So we have 3 options that we'd like to present to you. And currently, our funding is through the Kansas Department of Health, their state revolving loan fund at low interest rate. We requested the $31.5 million, basically based on the feasibility study costs of $27 million for construction and $4.5 for the engineering portion of it. And at that time, when we put that into play about a little over a year ago, our interest rate was 1.3%. So that's where our dollars and what it was set up on initially. So the first option that I will present is to amend our loan amount from $31.5 million to $41.5 million, which is the overall project cost is roughly $41.6 million, but kind of rounding to $500,000 increments. Have talked with KDHE, and we will be able to maintain our 1.3% interest rate and amend the loan to this $41.5 million. the caveat to that is we'll have to provide some additional financial information looking at our 2023 rates, and then they will send that information to their contracted financial consultant, and they'll determine if we can pay the debt. The additional debt for the project is based on the fact that in the 2023 water and sewer rate study, we included $40 million for the loan of this project because we had, been through enough of the discussion that we knew at one time we were hovering around 37 million, and we're still looking for some additional pieces of equipment to come in cost. So the decision on my part was made to look at a $40 million figure to put in our rates. And so if we would choose to follow that route, the additional debt on that is roughly $86,000 a year. And in our budget, that's probably something we could just absorb. Debbie will talk a little more specific in the rate impacts because she's an expert with those numbers, and we'll let her cover that. The second option would be to postpone construction, which we have had those discussions over time with KDHE, and that process seems to be up and down and what we think is good. They'd have to agree to us and agree to that and give us additional time. There's probably no real guarantee that the costs would not increase. What we're seeing in some of the market data is that the escalation went up very quick and steep, and now we're at a little bit of a plateau, but we haven't seen that huge drop going on the backside or deflation in that area, so no guarantee there. The other that we haven't really pressed KDHE on until we will, if that's a direction we take, they may not be able to guarantee the 1.3% or that we can increase our loan because obviously they're doing projects on a pretty steady basis, loaning out their dollars. We believe the current rate is about 2.23% or what we saw at the end of October, but some of the interest rates have changed in November. So just in general, if we spoke in general, for every 0.5% interest increase on the $41.5 million, that adds $2.4 million in interest. So if we had a 1% increase in the interest rate, we'd be looking at roughly $4.8 million additional costs for just interest at what the rate is today.
So how did we get that 1.3 interest rate locked in? Is that something, have we? Yeah.
That was good timing because I think the best rate that I ever saw was 1.29%. It was just the timing we were ready to set up for our loan, and we went ahead and chose to go for the loan with the dollars we knew at that time, just so that we hit on that low number. And by luck, not every time do you make the right call, but at that time we got the great interest rate and locked it in. And they're willing to let us continue for this amendment at that rate.
Their willingness on that part is significant.
Yeah, I'm
in this
just
climate.
surprised they did that. I'm trying to figure out
Even
how.
have it in writing twice,
Well done.
Yeah.
just to make sure that we were on that. And they've never waffled in that discussion from the beginning.
So where do those funds come out of? The state have a pool of money somewhere,
And they leverage those dollars for these type of projects. And I think they probably had some additional dollars added with the recent government programs and
Programs, so.
dollars.
Yeah, I don't know their specific finances, but these particular categories certainly line up with
so it's
ARPA
not like
dollars.
it's not like dollars they borrowed that they're hedging. So it's dollars they have. So
Yeah,
that
it's
makes
dollars
a little
they have.
more.
They leverage them for additional projects, and
That fund has been there many years.
yes, it has. We looked at this earlier, Jessica and James and I. We were trying to decide how they calculated it, and basically it's at a 30% reduction or 60% roughly of what the current rates are for this
So
loan.
we'll get the 31.5 million at the 1.3, and then the additional we'll get at market, which could be the 2.3 or what?
No, it's at 1.3. We get to
Even-
continue on at the 1.3
thing.
in writing twice, just to make sure I didn't hear it wrong.
Okay, well I saw that, but okay.
Yeah. we continue with the,
Could
we
you go get more
maintain the
money
1
for us
point.
for something?
What's that?
Could you out and go get some more money for us at that rate or something? I mean,
Well, I don't know, but
that
it
we could
was,
use on something else?
we have been amazed that they've been this kind to us on that, and
Yeah, when you said amend it, I thought, I was
no,
concerned that
they're,
they wouldn't.
they're letting us maintain the 1.3% rate
Wow.
and increase it to, from 31.5 to 41.5. So, hate to try to ask too much about delays and timing, because I don't know what we can guarantee past this. I was not sure that this would turn out, that maybe part of it would be at the lower interest rate and then the additional dollars at the higher rate, but they have indicated that that's not a problem.
As long as we keep moving forward.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, say, asked twice just because it seemed too good, so we're there, I think. And then, our third option was to take some of the dollars out of the operating budget. We have some additional dollars there if we took out of that. But what concerns me there is that's kind of our buffer for our long-term rate analysis, and I'm going to let Debbie speak a little bit more to that. And we've been planning, as City Manager Scragg said, for these projects for, you know, the 15-plus years and how they would fit into our rates, so that we didn't end up with a huge rate shock for our customers, and trying to kind of keep a tab on that. So these large projects have been included at this time. Do you have questions on the funding options? If not, I'm going to turn it over to Debbie and let her talk specific to our impacts on our rates, to kind of talk through what debt we have included and how that fits together.
Next slide, Scott. To go back to your question, Commissioner Hoppick, on that second one, our concern was if we postpone the construction of the project beyond the date, the 2024 date, they've been nice, and we are not certain that they may continue to be that nice. That's kind of what our concern was.
Well, yeah, I would guess any potential cost savings from reduction in cost would be offset by your interest, so.
Yes, yes.
Fairly quickly, so.
And that was our concern with that particular option, So as Martha's mentioned earlier, we do anticipate that this additional rate, in the additional $1.5 million basically could be absorbed into the rate schedule, into the operating funds. But what I wanted to present, we've seen this before, we saw it just a couple of months ago, was we did include in this particular rate study schedule and the analysis for the 2023 rates, we included $40 million of future debt payments for this particular project, as Martha mentioned, because we knew the costs were going up. And we knew that if this didn't happen, we could always reel those back down. And as you may or may not recall, for 2023, the City Commission chose not to increase rates, so we had a 0% increase for 2023, and that was to enable us to kind of shake out where the fund balance was and see if we could catch up in what our expenditures were going to be. And in this rate schedule, we also anticipated over the next 4 years after that to have about a 3% increase. But as you can see in this rate schedule, that dark purple line that we showed back in August or whenever we came before goes down tremendously once we start adding these costs of this debt financing. So that 3% may change, it may not, depending on where our spending goes and how our budgets come in going into the future. But we just wanted to remind you of that information. On the next slide, as Martha mentioned, that $1.5 million over 20 years, which is the additional to the rate study schedule, is about $86,000 per year. That's about 1/3 of 1% of the total budget for the utility fund. So it's a very minute section. The utility fund has about a $20+ million annual operating budget. So that $86,000 is about 1/3 of 1% of that. So it's not a huge number in that. And that's why we kind of felt like we could probably absorb it in the rates that we currently have. If we needed to use rates, I think we calculated that rate to be like $3 a year for 21,000 users of water. So that's just some additional information for you to have as you make this consideration. Are there any questions on the impacts of the rates before I pass it back to Martha?
Quick. So if you go to that purple line there, it shows, about $3 million reduction in our ending fund balance. And that includes us upping the rate 3% every year?
Yes.
So at that point in 2028,
But that also, well, the part you don't have in this particular one that you would have had in the original presentation is it also assumes that our budgeted expenditures, which we typically budget about $25 million in expenditures, are going to go up 3% every year. And what we've seen historically is that we don't spend the full amount that we budget. But that's why we went to that 0% interest increase this year, is because, for example, in 2021, we spent $16 million in a $25 million budget. So I don't want to say those numbers are escalated, but until we can get that number to an accurate budgeted number where we're spending what, it's not that we don't need to spend it, because everything that we're budgeting for is needed. It's just that with our staffing is short and we're not able to get all the projects done, those numbers just aren't coming into what we're budgeting. But as Martha will always tell us this, we need to do it. We just haven't gotten to that point yet.
You may recall those conversations revolved around large construction projects, water main improvements, and we continue to design them, and we continue to try to get them out the door, but they're not progressing at the pace that we've been budgeting them. So
Right.
that's where some of that capacity comes from.
Right. Is that,
yeah, I don't have the full thing, yeah. So
Yeah.
it was just a concerning trend
Yeah.
that I was trying to,
and that's why we review that every year. And so what we'll see is next year we may see, okay, the numbers came in and we need to do it 2.5% this year and maybe 3.5% the next year. We're trying to level those out as much as we can, and trying to get to that pinpoint, that actual number, what we can physically do and what we can actually get done in a year. And if we had full staffing, that would make a huge difference as well, because that's a lot of the savings in that fund is staffing shortages. Any other? Okay.
On the staffing shortages, will this new treatment plant require more people?
We're not intending to need any additional people for the process now. They're going to learn some new pieces. We have more automated equipment than we do today, so. But the technical side of it will be more technical than it is currently. Safe story?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a short take out of that as far as additional staff, no, just technical expertise in some areas will take some training to get to that point, but it's more automated. Similar to our South Water plant, it's fairly automated. We do not have staff at the site. We have cameras that watch the equipment, and you can look and see if anything's went astray, or you can bring up on SCADA and actually see what's happening live at the facility then. So we'd be looking at, this will be something that they can read from an operator station more so than they have currently today. Okay. Scott's caught up with me. And as far as, take a quick second here, the material shortages have been pretty constant with projects we're doing right now for water service lines, and we're in the same boat as both of the engineering firms talked about. We're looking for different ways to design and different materials to use, and can we delete curb stops and do something different. So it's not isolated to large projects like this. We're seeing it in that, and those delivery times are in the 8 to 10 months for those products. So we have some large orders out there and buying materials that we get them. So it's something we've seen throughout in our daily projects right now. So to kind of get back to this, basically what we're looking for today is to get some consensus from you on, our guaranteed maximum price at $41.6 million, and the cost-saving split of 35% city, 65% Black and Veatch. And I can say that City Manager Scragg and I and James have met a few times and talked about that split and different things and tried to look at the different angles that we could look at so we could answer more questions if you have there. And then just to get the nod that you want us to continue on and complete the design build of Institute of America agreements and then bring those on back to, get ready for the design phase and try to implement, getting the materials on site and moving forward with construction. Also a thought on what you might look for as far as the funding options that we gave you. So I don't know if you want to roll that into one or if you want to speak to each one independently or how you'd like to move forward with the discussion.
I would just suggest take us through the decision tree
Okay.
and whichever one determines the next question, go with that one first.
All right, we'll start.
Well, I think it'd be helpful as well. And from staff's perspective, our recommendation would be the cost savings split, proceeding with the guaranteed maximum price, and what we described as option number one, expanding that loan with KDHE and trying to lock in that interest rate. If you ask me to project, I'm much more concerned about cost overruns than I'm optimistic about cost savings to be had. And, let's say we save $1 million. That 65-35 split compared to a 50-50 split, that's $150,000 difference on the city's bottom line if we were to save that. I'd take a lot more consolation in having a guaranteed maximum price.
So, Mike, we talked a little bit about how the guaranteed maximum price of the 41.6 and the cost savings for below the guaranteed maximum price. That would be, as Commissioner Scragg, or getting lost in my story. City Manager Scragg mentioned.
You promoted me.
Yes. Yeah, I'm looking out for you, Mike. That's a process, and we've been through many numbers, as I mentioned, to get to that. And we did look at options to where we would consider if the cost overrun was at in different splits. And as mentioned, we settled in on knowing exactly where we stand for that guaranteed maximum price. So we thought I think that option is the best choice for our project today. So I'll stop with that one. And
I was just going to say, if it make it easier for you, I don't think I would be proficient enough in any of these areas of estimating to come up with a better solution than what you've proposed already.
so that's the first decision point that we'd like to know if you're have a consensus on that, and then we'll be developing the agreement, which Aaron Martin, our legal counsel, has several hours in reviewing the base documents. And actually, with this process, with the guaranteed maximum price and the savings, it stays very close to the actual base document, so there's little adjustment to the wording. Makes his job a little easier at the end. So we have been in close contact and had several meetings with him to get to this point. So
Is Commissioner Ryan, did you have any comments, preferences?
No questions, but if you want me to weigh in on the funding options, I'm agreeable to amending the loan amount upwards. Postponing doesn't make any sense to me, considering the state is driving all the targets here. And I hate to go away from that 1.5. Basically, I think projects this type should be funded by the users, and so option number one makes the most sense to me.
All right, thank you. Have any,
does that hit on all the
It's agreement
points,
with
if I understand it right? The
Continue.
guaranteed maximum price, the current split, 65-35, continue on with the agreement and funding option one.
yes.
All right?
Yes.
I think we can, we're thankful to get to this point on our end. So, thank you very much.
In the way I understand this cost savings, the 65% is going to give Black and Veatch incentive to hustle for.
You're exactly right. Yes, that's exactly the purpose of it. You know, but we all have a skin in the game because we all want to deliver the project as efficiently as possible. So it generates a collaborative team, and we'll work together to the benefit of the project.
As one point of clarification, that is overall savings. It's not line item by line item, and
Right.
we got to get the whole project in and see how it turns out.
That's an incredibly important point too,
Yes.
because as the costs come in, you may see a big savings, but you have to wait until you work through the rest of the project.
So I think it sounds like a good plan to move forward.
All right, we're done.
Seems awful easy today. There's a lot of work that got to this point. I want to thank Martha and HDR and Black and Veatch.
Well, thank you all for coming, and happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed.
Right, we'll be back at 4 o'clock. forgot to pay attention, sorry. It is 4 o'clock, in time for the weekly Salina City Commission meeting. Would ask the clerk if the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
May we have roll call, please?
Mayor Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Here.
Commissioner Linkowitz,
Here.
Commissioner Longbine,
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
All right. All who are able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will start with awards and proclamations.
Item 3.1, recognition of November 26, 2022 as Shop Small Saturday in the city of Salina. Leslie Bishop, Executive Director of Salina Downtown, Inc., will read the proclamation.
And just before you do, I'll give you a moment to compose yourself. I just want to preempt you and thank you again for everything you did to coordinate a fantastic parade Saturday.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. We're proud
And,
of our efforts, and it was a success, and we've had nothing but compliments through email, social media, and phone calls, so thank you.
Anyone who wants an aerobic workout, walk in front of a float trying to give out candy at about 4.5, 5 miles an hour for the entire length of Santa Fe. I want you to know.
Or another aerobic workout is trying to find Santa who is missing in action.
You don't let them off in front of a restaurant.
That'll get your heart rate up.
And I did just one more time, because I don't think everyone heard when we lit the tree, but that tree is very, very nice. You have to go down and see it. It's in a great spot. But the tree is sponsored by the City of Salina, Salina Downtown, Inc., and First Bank, Kansas. So if you want just a place with a nice mood and just that moment, go sit by the tree and enjoy Christmas.
And the fence around that was funded by the Salina Regional Health Foundation also.
Oh, 4 folks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, the
Thank
floor
you.
is yours.
Well, I'm Leslie Bishop, Executive Director of Salina Downtown, and thank you for this opportunity to read the proclamation for Small Business Saturday. Whereas the government of Salina, Kansas celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community, according to the United States Small Business Administration, the strengthening United States economy in recent years has nurtured many opportunities for entrepreneurs, with the number of small businesses in the U.S. on the rise. In 2022, the number of small businesses in the U.S. reached 33.2 million, making up nearly all of U.S. businesses. The increase in the number of small businesses in the U.S. in 2022 is representative of the sustained growth, as it marks a 2.2% increase from previous year and an overall growth of 12.2% from 2017 to 2022. And whereas small business currently employ 61.7 million small business employees in the U.S., which makes up approximately half, 46.4, of the U.S. workforce, and whereas 94% of the consumers in the United States say Small Business Saturday has had a positive impact on their community. By spending money locally, it helps stimulate the local economy and keep businesses booming within a local region. And whereas 96% of consumers shop small because of the personalized experience, unique products or services, and a sense of familiarity that small businesses offer. And whereas 58.1 million consumers plan to shop on Shop Small Saturday and are encouraged to shop small all year long. And whereas 73% of consumers who reportedly shop small at independently owned retailers and restaurants on Shop Small Saturday did so with friends and family. And whereas Salina, Kansas supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities. And whereas advocacy groups as well as public and private organizations across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Shop Small Saturday. Now therefore, I, Trent W. Davis, M.D., Mayor of Salina, Kansas, do here proclaim November 26, 22 as Shop Small Saturday and urge the residents of our community and the communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year.
Thank you. We're going to have music piped in on the streets, not just downtown, but South 9th, anything to get people out?
It's on our strategic plan, Mayor Davis.
Okay.
And I
guess
do encourage you, the Cellar is celebrating their grand opening Wednesday evening. They're down below our office. So if you start the holiday weekend and the holidays off by visiting the Cellar Whiskey and Wine Bar.
Wow. And I guess
I probably wasn't allowed to do that. Sorry.
Don't leave. I want to give you this signed proclamation. But if you're going to be out of town, that doesn't mean that you still can't shop in Salina.
And doesn't mean
online, right?
That's right. Many of our businesses, that's how many of them sustained their businesses and kept their doors open through e-commerce during COVID. And many of them have kept that way of purchasing purchasing items from their businesses by online.
Great. Thank you. Come on forward. Okay.
You too.
And if you're buying gifts and you don't know what to get for that special person, just start off at one end of Santa Fe and walk to the other. Or if you're a little braver, walk along South 9th Street and then go in from the sidewalk. You can get ideas just looking through windows. Let's move on to the consent agenda.
Item 5.1, approve the minutes of November 14, 2022.
Well, I guess we can just ask one question. Any discussion on the minutes?
Mayor Davis, I move we approve consent agenda item 5.1.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, passes 5-0. Thank you. Move on to administration 6.1.
Item 6.1, approve resolution number 22-8093, authorizing the mayor to sign a memorandum of understanding among the City of Salina, Saline County, and Central Kansas Mental Health Center relating to a mental health co-responder program.
Captain. Hi there.
Paul Forster, Captain with the Salina Police Department. I don't think there's any secret that we have an increasing frequency of first responders dealing with subjects in mental health crisis. Law enforcement probably isn't the best equipped to deal with these folks on a daily basis, but that's what we're tasked with. Usually we have two outcomes. We either take the subject to jail or we take the subject to the hospital, have a referral and an evaluation done. And we think that there's probably better ways to deal with this. In 2020, we started looking, a community group got together and we started looking at better ways to help serve this population in our community. Part of that research was looking at agencies around the country and how they're dealing with this situation. And then we went a step further and started looking at agencies closer to home. As a CLIA accredited agency, that's one of the first places I always look, just because they're very similar with us. They have good policies and procedures. And we were fortunate enough that one of our neighboring agencies, Riley County Police Department, actually has a co-responder program. The co-responder model is one of the things, after doing some research, that we thought would fit our community. It would be easy to get started, not a lot of cost associated with it, relatively speaking. And so we thought this would be a good place to start. So in 2020, a small group from the police department in Central Kansas Mental Health went over to Riley County and we spoke with their co-responders over there, kind of learned how their program worked. They basically started the same way as what we're looking. In 2017, they started with 2 co-responders that worked full-time out of the police department. They were employees with Pawnee Mental Health, which is the equivalent to Central Kansas Mental Health here in Salina. And these 2 co-responders basically went with patrol officers and responded to calls for service of people in mental health crisis. Their program has been so successful that today they now have one full-time co-responder at the police department, and they have 10 licensed clinicians in their crisis intervention unit that have 24/7 response available to officers now. So you can see that I guess Riley County saw the need for this program and have expanded to where they're at currently. So in April of 2021, the police department started collecting data on our calls for service, and it's remained pretty consistent throughout the last 18 to 20 months. As of October, we had responded to just about 1,100 calls for service, so almost 2 calls per service per day of officers responding. This didn't include fire and EMS, it didn't include the sheriff's department. This is strictly just police officers responding. And this also, when we took into account the number of hours, this was just the hours that we were there. So some of those calls, we had 4 and 5 officers. Normally, almost always 2 officers are there. So you can see the 934 hours that's listed on there is probably a lot higher than that when you take into account the total time spent. So our group, obviously 2020 slowed things down with COVID. And then in 2021, we started collecting data. We got together a community improvement team, which is an amazing group of people in our community from a lot of different resources. And we started looking at how we could actually implement this program. As you know, funding is always a major slowdown when we're trying to implement something new. That was about the time that the American Rescue Plan Act dollars came out. And so we started researching that and determined that mental health is one of the criteria in that. And so we started looking at that as a funding source to get this program started. So that will be where the majority of the funding is coming from to initially start this program. The program, what we're proposing through this memorandum is we would have 2 licensed clinicians that would be employees of Central Kansas Mental Health. They would be housed at the police department and managed by us, but they will be employees of Central Kansas Mental Health. Obviously, there's going to be some logistics that we still have to work out as far as hours of operation, when they will be there, how we're going to have them respond with law enforcement. But initially, what we learned from the co-responders in Riley County is just doing a lot of ride-alongs so that, one, they can build rapport with officers and also train each other in how we both operate. As you can see, the majority of the funding is coming from the ARPA funds from Salina County. Central Kansas Mental Health has also provided an in-kind donation to help better attract more qualified applicants. We are requiring this to be licensed clinicians, so we felt the need to probably have a little bit higher salary than what a normal starting licensed clinician in Salina might have, just because of the nature of the work that they're going to be doing. And then, as I said, the police department and the city, we're going to be providing office space. We'll be managing the program and all the equipment that they need to help us respond. So over the 2 years of the program that we have funding through ARPA funds, we'll be collecting a lot of data to see how this project is working. Currently, our CIT team meets quarterly, and then we have subcommittees under that meet monthly. And so we'll be looking at how the success of this program, if it is successful, we hope after 2 years that we can either find additional grant funding or look to make it a budgetary proposal split between Salina County and the city of Salina. So the recommended actions that we have are approve the resolution. You could approve the resolution with amendments as you deem appropriate. You could postpone consideration of this to a different date with additional information provided, or you could vote to deny this resolution. And we are recommending that you take option 1 to approve the resolution.
Right.
And I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Thank you. Commissioner Longbine, questions?
Yeah, will this work in conjunction with the Sheriff's Department?
It is. It's all 3. The police department, sheriff's department, and Central Kansas.
Everyone's going to
Mental
work
Health.
together on it?
Yes.
I notice in here it talks about a vehicle, so will the the caseworkers have their own vehicle, or will they ride to calls with a uniformed police officer?
Initially, how we see it is they would be riding with an officer. If there isn't an instance where they were at the office and were called out, we would provide them with a vehicle to drive there.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, they may have follow-up work that isn't necessarily direct response to a call-out.
Correct.
True, they would, okay, that makes
So
sense.
we would provide them a vehicle. They won't take the vehicle home. It's just one that we already have there at the police department that they would use.
But I guess, yeah, my main question would be that these individuals would never really respond to any type of situation without either the sheriff or the police department
Correct.
being
They
there.
will never respond alone.
Good, okay.
Not really a question, just more of a comment. I'm extremely excited and optimistic about this program. Just off the top of my head, I can see this being a linchpin to maybe more intervention for homeless individuals that need the services that, whether it's addiction or emotional issues. And I just see this being very useful, worth every penny, and I think at the end of the 2 years, we're just going to need to find that money.
And
Go ahead.
And we did, yeah, I noticed you talked about how, Junction City now has 24/7 coverage. Does your data that you guys have collected, does it give specific times and days that are higher incidents?
We do. However, there's really no, it seems like initially we thought that from what we talked to with Riley County, that we thought that after 5 p.m., from 5 to 8 p.m. might be the higher call volume just because the services close. Most businesses close at 5. But what we found is there's really no rhyme or reason. I mean, it's just comes and goes, but it's just amazing to me how often we deal with these folks. And the information provided doesn't take into account the number of phone calls that dispatch also takes from people that we talk to on a daily basis. So, but yeah, it's just, there's really no rhyme or reason to the time or day that it occurs. It's just whenever.
Mayor, may I?
Will these clinicians be on 24/7 call?
No, so what we're initially going to do is we will figure out the schedule that we'd like them to work. We're hoping to do probably 4 10-hour days, split between the two of them so that we have 7-day coverage. In the times that they're not on duty, we'll just continue as we do right now. The added feature that we have, though, is then the next day when they come in, they will have all the information of the people that we dealt with the day before. So if we need to do some follow-up or try and get those people to some services, we can do that, hopefully with a follow-up phone call or that type of follow-up. So.
And does mental health have anyone in the queue to take these jobs?
We'll have to find out. Once this is done, once we have the memorandum signed, then we'll begin working on the hiring process. So.
Commissioner Ryan?
Yes. Can you hear me, Mayor?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm a little disadvantaged. I can't see any of the visual feeds, so I'm just listening in. But I'm curious to know if it could expand on the genesis of the community improvement team. I think that's a great idea. Where'd that come from? I haven't heard of them. I love that this program has come out of that. But, can you put some faces to that for me, or tell me how it got to be put together?
Sure. So it started out as a crisis intervention team, which was law enforcement, the county attorney's office, people from community corrections, and then Chad Young with Salina Rescue Mission. So we had a pretty small group, and just throughout the course of the last couple of years, we've tried to expand. So that's why we renamed it to the Community Improvement Team. At our last meeting, I would hate to try and give you names of everybody, but at our last meeting, I would venture to say we probably had 35 attendees from different resources, to include Central Kansas Foundation, the hospital, Salina Family Cares, both community corrections, court services. So, I mean, it's just a whole litany of people. And so this group just keeps getting bigger, and everybody is pretty excited to continue on. And like I said, this is just one of the subcommittees under that. One of the committees is just dealing with homeless persons. We have this committee, and then there's a couple other committees that are dealing with basically like recidivism, trying to keep people out of jail, reoffending, things like that. So it's a pretty big group. But yeah, we're excited. It keeps expanding, and so we have a lot of services to offer for the community.
I think that's fantastic, and if PD has kind of pushed this forward or moderated it, I congratulate you. I think that's a great thing to be happening. I was going to ask about quantifying what the city is putting in. Usually when we get our reports, we kind of get a dollar figure on the physical impact side for Salina. I see everybody else's numbers, but is there any cost to training? And then I saw a vehicle in there, but maybe you're just using existing. I assume this will be ongoing. Anybody thrown any numbers around for future budgeting?
So we had kind of put together some numbers, but when we started looking at it, it's kind of hard to quantify. I mean, when you're talking, we have 240 hours of training listed here, but I venture to say it's probably going to be a lot more than that by the time we're all said and done. So we really didn't want to try and put a dollar amount on it, just because, I mean, I don't know that you could specifically say what we're going to spend on an annual basis. So that's where the data collection is going to come in over the next 2 years, not only the success of the program, but what is it actually costing us to run the program and make it be what we want it to be. But we're also hoping to expand the program too over the next 2 years. So that was why we really didn't put a dollar amount from the city's contribution side.
I would say that as the conversation started, Paul and the chief tried to quantify that. We took a look at it. My assessment was, and no big ticket unique expenditures, is more absorbing it into our operations, and it looked like something that we certainly could absorb, let alone the value that it adds. So we're not anticipating any large ticket. Now, when we get to the end of 2 years, and I fully expect it's going to be successful and we're going to want to continue it, then we need to be prepared to talk about staffing expenses.
Thank you.
Just a few questions. The 240 hours of training, is that officers getting training on the mental health side of crisis, or is it the responders getting training in the personal safety police aspects of going into a dangerous situation training?
Right. For this presentation, that was just the 240 hours was us training the co-responder.
Okay.
But as I said, I think it's probably going to end up being a lot more than 240 hours. But on the flip side, they are going to be also training us in how they do things. When we had the presentation, I had the co-responder come over from Riley County here about a month ago. Mike and Jacob attended that, and one of the things that she said in that is, now that she's done so many call-outs, that a lot of times now when she gets there, the officers have already done pretty much a lot of the protocol that she does, just because they've learned it from being with her so much. So that's kind of what we're anticipating will happen here as well.
That's great. I think probably with 2 years of experience, you'll probably get enough information to figure out a rough budget, assuming we want to continue this. Are there any endpoints that you have in mind for gauging the effectiveness of the program at the end of the 2-year program? Period.
So one of the things that we'll be looking at is, and if you'd like, I have some information that they had on some of their successes, but basically just reducing the amount of time that officers spend, reducing persons going to jail and getting them the services that they need. So one of the things that they looked at was they went from, I can't remember the exact number, but their reduction in officers actually going out and responding to calls was pretty significant, because those folks got, a lot of the people that we deal with are this, it's repeat customers, I guess, or repeat clients. And so after they had built that rapport with those people and those, then they could just talk to the co-responder, as opposed to having an officer go out. They could just talk to them on the phone, and and get the situation resolved and get them the service they need. So that's probably what the biggest thing we'll be looking at is, what time did we reduce for officers going to calls, repeat persons, Right now, as I said, there's a lot of times that we'll deal with the same individual 5, 6, 7 times a week until we get the services that they need. So we're hoping that we can reduce that to maybe 1 time, and then we won't have to go back out.
And those costs can be harder to document and quantify, but there's a movement to decriminalize mental health and poverty. And there are real dollars that are saved when people's real needs are met. So not only do you reduce your time, but expenditures as well.
Right.
And end up helping folks get the services they need. I think it's fantastic. And actually puts us up in the upper echelon of communities when you listen to cities that are looked at as being, on the move and innovative and sensitive. This is all the buzz, so to speak.
Yes, sir.
We have any one online with a question or comment? Oh, all righty. Any public comment here?
Norman Mantle, Salina. I'm a veteran. First, is there a Veterans Justice Court in this area? As far as I know, no. 2, the VA is willing to instruct law enforcement, but law enforcement is not interested in getting instruction. I've been to Wichita to the VA hospital. We would teach you, train you, but the director says they're not interested. She told me so. 3, law enforcement is not interested. 4, you're getting in deep water here. You better talk to the veterans areas. You better verify these calls. I will never forget July 8th, 2015. Law enforcement come to my house. No search warrant, no arrest warrant, a random call. So verify that it is actually a good call. You're going to have to train these people. You're putting law enforcement in a bad situation. Junction City is near a military installation. That's why they're more active down there. Us veterans, it's a bad situation. If you corner a veteran, I've been to one veterans gathering. If you compromise a veteran, you're in trouble. This veteran, he went to Vietnam, and he says, I knew Lieutenant Colonel Helmore, but he says, don't compromise the veteran.
Well, actually, this is the perfect program for that type of engagement.
That's going to be a tough road to hoe, because
Doesn't have to be easy, but people are trained for exactly this type situation.
well, like I said, the director there in Wichita, she says, we're willing to train law enforcement, but they're not interested. Why?
Well, we don't want to fight the veteran, we want to help the veteran.
I've been there.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much for presenting. Bring it back to the commissioners for action.
Mayor Davis, I move we approve resolution number 22-8093, authorizing the mayor to sign a memorandum of understanding among the city of Salina, Saline County, and Central Kansas Mental Health Center relating to a mental health co-responder program.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded to approve resolution number 22-8093. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Off to a good start. Item 6.2.
Item 6.2, consider entering into a 3-year service agreement with Flock Group Incorporated for the installation and leasing of 22 fixed automatic license plate readers.
Chief.
Good afternoon. Intern Chief Sean Morton. I come to you this afternoon make a proposal with regards to entering into agreement with Flock Safety for 22 fixed license plate readers. I might also mention that with me today is Hector Valdez from Flock Safety online via Zoom in case we have some technical questions, reference their software programs and stuff that he could possibly answer. License plate readers aren't something new to the Salina Police Department. In fact, in 2015, the Salina City Commission had approved 2 mobile license plate readers for us. At that time, we placed them on police vehicles, and they were used throughout Salina at that particular time. They were in use up until July of 2021. We were having some maintenance issues with them, having to replace some boards and different things in the components to the license plate reader system, and the functionality and connecting, and there was just a lot of problems with them, so half the time they weren't even working, so we finally just took them out of service. With that said, they are a very valuable tool to law enforcement. So we started looking at what other options there are, not only mobile, but also fixed, and what also works in conjunction with some of the technology that we already have. In the past, I've came to you with some requests for some equipment from a company called Axon, which makes our body cameras, our in-car cameras. They also make tasers. And Flock Safety is the only company that actually makes an in-car video recording system that also incorporates their tag reading system. So looking at that and continuity of our databases, so when you're searching for information, you're not having to access 2 or 3 different databases, and your technology is working together as opposed to working against you and working against time. So Flock certainly seemed like a company that would make our technology more less than having siloed data systems. And we also were aware that there are several communities, Wichita specifically in Kansas, that is using Flock Safety now, fixed license plate reader systems. They started out in 2019, I believe it was, and they started out with a pilot program and had 25 fixed systems then. They've been so beneficial to them and their investigations since that time. They now have roughly 134 fixed systems in Wichita. In speaking with them, Wichita Police Department that is, I've learned that they've been able to solve crimes that they haven't, in the past been able to solve just because the system allows for searching of vehicle information, so not just tag information, which is helpful. And when I say vehicle information, I'm talking about vehicle color, vehicle make, model. So you don't necessarily need to have a tag. So, in a lot of cases we receive, we don't have anything other than a vehicle description, and there's no real way to research that currently to come up with suspect vehicles. And this system will allow for the searching of those vehicles and hopefully allow us to identify a vehicle that has a tag on it that came across one of these cameras. Last Friday, we actually had put out a Crime Stoppers. I'm not sure if you saw it, reference some individuals that were in the YMCA and were stealing property from the locker rooms. There was a vehicle associated with that, no tag. There's a picture that we have. And having that information, we could start searching these cameras for that vehicle and potentially coming up with suspect vehicle or leads that we can follow up on to try to clear those cases. Wichita Police Department has told me that they've cleared several homicides with the aid of license plate readers, located abducted children, amber alerts, silver alerts. Salina Police Department's experience with license plate readers since we've had them here locally is we've recovered several vehicles, several stolen tags, developed other cases, such as drug cases, and they've been instrumental in locating actually an individual that was involved in shooting one of our police officers a year or so ago, and also in locating a suspect in a homicide case from this year. So we've talked to them, and they provided us with a quote for service for 22 of these fixed license plate readers at various locations in Salina. It comes to an annual cost of $55,000, with the first year having installation costs being $4,950. This is a 3-year agreement. And we would, of course, during that time be logging our successes and with the system and making sure that the dollars we are spending on this are, that we are able to clear cases and clear crime. This wasn't a project that we had budgeted this year, but we have found some savings in personnel and benefits that we can make the year 1 payment from. We did ask for funds in 2023 to cover half of the cost. Initially, we had thought that we could do this with 10 or 11 cameras, but in looking at the different locations throughout the city where we think they might be most effective, we think 22 would be better. And for that additional cost in 2023, we will once again take that out of our budget from other line items, potentially savings within personnel salaries and benefits. So I have several recommendations for you today with regards to this particular project. Being approve the police department's request for the 22 fixed automated license plate readers, approve the request with amendments, postpone consideration, and deny the request altogether. Staff recommends option 1 in this case, and welcome any questions that you might have.
Just before the question, this may just a material question. Is this for purchase or leasing of the device?
Leasing, it's like a subscription. We won't own the readers themselves.
So at the end of the 3 years, then we would either renew the lease or decide to buy them or buy new?
Well,
or
we wouldn't be able to buy them. We could renew the lease, or we could have them removed.
Okay. All right. I'll start this. Well, I'll start with Commissioner Ryan. Any questions or comments?
Yes, I assume these are going to be placed in advantaged locations where they won't be vandalized, since the vendor's responsible for them. Is that correct?
That's correct.
They're high on a pole or something?
Yeah,
like
they're
that?
high on a pole.
And why just 1 month on the data? It would seem to me cases can take time to develop or to investigate. Why wouldn't you store your data forever?
That's actually Flock's policy, and Hector, if you have some more on that as well, but that's Flock's policy and it also goes back to, there's some concerns among the public with regards to that data being maintained for long periods of time. So Flock's maximum time, unless it's improved, is my understanding by the governing body, to extend that period of time is 30 days. Is that correct, Hector?
Yes, that's exactly correct. If a public body such as yours requests that there be an extended retention policy, then that is something that we could look at with the police department. But our standard retention policy is 30 days, as the chief mentioned. That aligns with protecting folks' privacy while giving police enough time to follow up on cases as well.
I suppose that you would learn about that from experience, but I'm just guessing PD might want to amend that at some point or extend it in a reasonable way that doesn't yet offend the people that the information is being gathered about. So it's just a thought.
Thank you.
Exactly, and we're always open to that discussion if it comes up as your community needing that. But we do see across the nation that that's sufficient amount of time while respecting folks' privacy.
Thank you.
As a follow-up to Commissioner Ryan's question, it did state on there that excluding wing replay, which is deleted after 7 days, what is the wing replay?
Wing replay is another service, not the LPR component that is up today for discussion.
It's not a service that we're
not getting. Okay,
That's correct.
It was in the agency agreement. That's why I asked.
Yeah, I think, Hector, don't you incorporate all of your services into the agreement?
Yes, it's part of the standard agreement, but you all are not purchasing that. That's an additional service, right? So we do have different public safety technologies, and that's why it kind of mentions that the retention there.
Could be a possibility for the future.
Commissioner Lankovich?
I have a couple
I had one more. I'm sorry.
sorry.
These are being leased, though. Who's responsible for any maintenance that's required if cameras go down or anything? Is that part of our lease agreement with them, or are we responsible?
Correct.
Okay.
That's Flock's responsibility.
Okay.
If they go down or repairs need to be made, they'll have a tech respond to fix the cameras.
Okay. I'd read something in here that didn't quite spell that out as clearly, so I wanted to verify that. Thank you. Okay, sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. That was my mistake. I have a couple questions. One, just the nature of a lease and electronics just in general becoming obsolete very quickly. Is there a rotation that happens at the end of the lease term where we get new cameras when we renew, or how does that work? Or is it just going to be the same cameras?
Yes. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I might have interrupted. My apologies. Yeah, that's because this is a software as a service model. As new hardware is available, let's say we replace the camera, you would have the latest version of the hardware that's available. Traditionally, LPR was much more expensive, but you'd be purchasing the camera. So I would kind of compare it to when you purchase an iPhone. Within a year, there's a new one, but you own that iPhone, so you're stuck with that old one. With us, anything happens to the camera goes down, camera gets hit by a car. When we go out and replace it, if we do have a new version, we would replace it with the newer version.
Thank you. The other question I had was, and there's not a mention of it here, so I figure it's a safe assumption that's no, but just for the public's benefit, there's no intention to use these for traffic enforcement, like stoplights, stop signs, et cetera.
You mean as far as detecting speed or that they've ran stoplights?
Right, it's mostly, okay.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question.
The previous car-mounted system, was that a lease agreement, or did we purchase that?
We purchased those. At the time we purchased those two camera systems were $53,000.
Yeah, I remember seeing them. And yeah, it looks to me like essentially $57,000 a year on this is about what it costs to put one officer.
Yeah, and the other thing that I didn't mention, but it was in the staff report, there's advantages to both a mobile system and a fixed system. A mobile system, you're identifying tags that may be in the system that are stolen tags, stolen vehicles, or wanted persons when you're there. But as we all know, most of the time when crimes are committed, it's not committed when an officer's there. So these are in the area, are collecting tags and vehicles, information. And so that can help us when we have a vehicle or a partial tag to try to search for that information and to identify suspects. And to leverage technology, to your point, to help us work these cases faster when we have police officer shortages, and this does help us in those investigations.
Right.
Another point in your report that I don't think came out in the verbal presentation was we'll have some that we can deploy as needed if we have areas of concern.
Correct. There's two that are called flex cameras that I had already did a one-year agreement on under my purchasing authority to initially try them out, but also they will be part of this program. And when we have problem areas, the hope is to take them and move them into those problem areas and be collecting data. So if there's an area that's maybe having vehicle burglaries, damage to properties, business burglaries, that if we can strategically place these mobile ones in that area, hopefully we can be collecting some data that way and bring them to a conclusion.
Okay. On the placement, will they be placed on city property, or will you have to get permission to put them on Evergy poles, or how will they be?
They're going to be in the city right-of-way, and they'll be on flock safety poles.
Oh, they'll be on their standalone poles?
That's correct.
Okay. I just thought they'd be on existing traffic lights.
Well, I take that, they could be on light poles too that are city-owned, or traffic light poles that are city-owned, but not necessarily Evergy poles.
Okay. And battery life. We have several days of overcast. What's the battery life on it?
Hector, I'll let you answer that question if you can.
The batteries, the solar panels, as long as they get, it doesn't have to be direct sunlight, but 4 to 6 hours, then they'll be able to charge the batteries for at least 36 hours is kind of standard there.
Okay. And along the lines of Commissioner Linkowitz comments, is there going to be some visible transparency so the public knows what this is and what it's doing?
As far as something recently that Wichita has done is Flock offers a website, and it indicates some information with regards to searches that are done on the fixed systems in your location. Hector, is there some other information that's included with that? I think also you can list your policy within that portal as well, the agency's policy within that portal as well. If not, that's something that will be available on our website, of course. But Hector, I can let you speak to some more of what's on that.
Yeah, the transparency portal is customizable by your department. Some of the fields that many departments choose to display are amount of searches, amount of hot lists received, who they're sharing with as far as other agencies, and the policy, as the chief mentioned. There'll be a link there. The folks, the community members will be able to see, and read the policy that your police department is following, and it's updated in real time.
Okay, thank you. And upon approval, what's the timeline of rolling this out?
Hector, can you answer that?
Yeah, so typically it takes about 2 months to go. We do white glove service in the sense that we'll be submitting permits with your city, scheduling installation, and then there'll be follow-up training for your department. So that'll take about 2 months typically.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, just a few questions, one comment. If this system can be connected to a more regional search? If there was, let's just say, something in Kansas City, and would our cameras here be notified to look for a certain license plate?
Yes, so your department will have access to alerts through the national database, NCIC. Your police officers, let's say there's a stolen vehicle reported anywhere else in the country, and if it's in this database, if it enters your community, they'll be alerted on their vehicle within 20 seconds that it's there. As far as searches, depending on who your department is sharing with, they'll be able to share cross-jurisdictionally and collaborate that way as well.
Yeah, I think Amber Alerts are probably another good example.
And Amber Alerts, my apologies, that's another, that's automatically also provided to your police department as soon as any of those vehicles arrive. So just you all will receive that on your phone as a community member. They're receiving the plate and the vehicle once it's passing by them, which is extremely important.
Okay, and I guess just to address some potential fear and paranoia of those of us who saw 1984 as a futuristic book, and Space Odyssey 2001 is a very futuristic thing, and those are so far in our rearview mirror we can't remember them now. Well, 3 questions. Is there any face recognition capability of this?
Nope.
Okay.
No facial recognition. The cameras point to the back of the vehicles, are focused on the license plate.
Okay. And I think it's sort of the big brother is watching phenomenon. To what extent, and could this be used for surveillance? If no crime has been committed, but if you needed to keep tabs on something, basically, the old days, the old radio thing, you'd put a tail on somebody. I guess you still put a tail on somebody. But can this be used for surveillance purposes?
It can be used as an investigative tool. I'm sure you can appreciate that in drug investigations, for instance, that oftentimes we are tracking vehicles and where they're going and where they're coming from. There's crimes that occur between Wichita and Salina, as I'm sure you can imagine, and some of those are drug crimes as well. So I guess to answer your question, yes, that's a possibility, that if it's part of a criminal investigation, that they can be put into what's the tag of the vehicle can be put into a hot list, and detectives notified when they hit those particular tags or hit those particular reading locations. With that said, there's audit trails within the system to know who's creating hot lists and what's the reason for creating the hot list item. And in our particular case, what we're going to require is that when you're making those or making inquiries, that you're going to associate it with a case number that we're working on, or you're going to associate it with a crime in a location if a case number is not available yet. So we have that information in the system, and it's retained for audit purposes at a later time.
Okay, and I don't laugh at this one. It's a serious question. Could a private person, through their attorney, petition you to track someone for them, like in a potential divorce case or something like that? But,
No.
So it would have to be an official
This is for
police.
law enforcement purposes.
All right.
Criminal investigations.
All right. And there was one other, but I think you've oh, I know what it was. Can people find out if their own tag is on the hot list?
I would say no, specifically if we were conducting some sort of investigation that we, of course, wouldn't want to be...
I would hope you tell them no in that case. But
disclosing that.
Right.
I guess you can go drive by the camera.
You find out.
If somebody shows
That's
up.
true.
Yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning that these cameras are all going to be posted in places that are public roadways, and the general public's expectation of privacy when we're traversing a public roadway is nil. It's nothing. We're out in public and have no expectations. And so to me, I have no ethical or moral problem with the idea of that kind of camera usage.
You're correct. Thank you for that comment, as well as, and I'm sure everybody realizes and I just got one myself with the Ring doorbell system. So there's cameras, and phones that are in the public space all the time. You walk downtown, I don't know how many cameras they have there, but if you're to Mr. Linkowitz's point, when you're in a public space, your right to privacy is not.
And then taking that one step further, hopefully it's a deterrent effect. We're noticing that in the downtown with the cameras they've had. Not only is it effective in the investigations, but hopefully there's a deterrent effect as well.
Yes, sir.
Well, some cities use sales tax and some use property tax. In Washington, D.C., they use the traffic cameras to balance the budget. But you're forewarned, go fast if you want, but you will have a letter in the mail soon, yeah.
I've really followed the system in Wichita and really been impressed with the results. Can you walk through how this is going to happen? You got a stolen car out of Dallas. It's in the NCIC system. One of our cameras hits on it. How do we get informed? How do your people get informed? What's that process?
Well, the plan is that on the mobile computers in the car that the officer will be logged in, and they will be able to see those alerts when they come in. Of course, the disadvantage to having a fixed system is, unlike the mobile, whereas you're right there when the alert comes in that, you've encountered a stolen vehicle. This, you may be several blocks away, but it may hit on another camera, down the road. So, the other thing to keep in mind too is a hit on a stolen vehicle, stolen tag, wanted person, in and of itself is not enough for them necessarily to make a stop. They're going to need to confirm that information with communications to verify that in fact that it is reported as stolen or that the person's wanted.
Okay, so a camera gets a hit, it's going to go straight to the patrol cars.
Correct.
Okay.
We're kind of talking a little bit too about communications. They could have access as well. I want to dig into that a little deeper because they've got a lot of stimulus going on in there right now.
And to clarify, when you say communications, you mean dispatch?
Dispatch, yeah, emergency communications. They could have access as well and could be dispatching people to those locations, but I want to be careful to make sure that we're not adding another layer of responsibility to them. And maybe the easiest thing is just for us to have it in patrol cars for the officers to get the notification.
All right, thank you. Any public comment here in the room?
Before we move to public, I just wanted to clarify something because I think you talked about how some places use it to help balance their budget through tickets. And again, we stated we're not going to be giving tickets out. This isn't something that's going to be checking speed limits and running stop signs.
Well, and I'll defer to Hector, but those are two different technologies.
Right, but I think Mayor Davis commented about how some places use it to, and I didn't want the public to get the wrong idea about what these are being used for. These are more for...
Correct. These are for investigative purposes, for law enforcement purposes. They're not tied to DMV records. As the chief mentioned, an investigation, once the patrol officer is alerted, then commences, right, to verify the vehicle, who may or may not be in there. And so this cannot, there's no button that can be switched on one day where they will then be issuing tickets or anything of that sort.
Okay. Thank you. Any public comment?
Mayor, Council, Richard Humphrey. Technology is going to take its path. On behalf of the community, we just really hope you guys work with your conflict resolution, as you guys are going to be probably dealing with a lot more calls and whatnot. So you're got good trust in you guys. And thanks for being our first line of defense. Bye.
Mark Labus, Salina. The chief had mentioned a mobile camera system that'd be mounted on a pole. Well, if it's just on intersections and actually on streets, that's not too much of a problem. But you run into when you start having a mobile pole and putting it anywhere on public property, you can very easily abuse, and I've seen the police department abuse their power personally, to look over in someone's backyard. At that point in time, you have no privacy, even though it's supposed to have it. That's why you have fences. Now the court systems have said, that if you're above, you can see down. But do we want to actually press that in court? That's the problem. He's mentioned using it for break-ins. So is it just for vehicles? From what I'm understanding is we have two things. It's for tracking vehicles that go in certain areas and whatnot. But then again, the chief said, well, we can use this for break-ins on certain areas and vehicles and whatnot. If vehicles in, you can spy into anybody without a warrant at that point in time, realistically. So if it stays at intersections, on streets, not pointed at backyards, I don't have a problem. But I doubt that that will stay that way.
I'd like to just reply. Anytime there's a crime, there's potentially a suspect vehicle. So then that's where the system is pertinent or relevant. Because if they've left the scene in a suspect vehicle, you could tie any crime to that, the usage in theory. Hopefully that helps.
All right, any,
I didn't expect my first time either. As I guess, hi, Charles Rankin with the Salina Journal. As I guess as the one of the local watchdog organizations, I should say. I have a couple questions. The biggest one is, has there been any studies about the accuracy of what this picks up? As far as I read in one report that Flock has in the past had upwards of 10% of license plates that have been misidentified with states. That seems like a pretty high number if it's 1 in 10. Has there been any other independent studies as to what the accuracy of these particular technologies are and how that could potentially affect the police resources as we're using them?
well, we can go straight to the source. If we can put you on the spot there, Hector.
Yeah, no problem. There have not been independent studies as of yet. This type of LPR is fairly new, has been around for about 5 years. What we do within the system is that we provide a probability percentage to the police department. As the chief mentioned, this is an investigative tool. So let's say they're receiving an alert. Our cameras, our machine learning is saying to them, there's a 90% chance that everything that we are saying is correct, right? And it'll give them for individual filters. Using that information and what the officer sees on the ground, that is where they make an assessment and make next moves. So we don't really look at it as accuracy as much as there's a probability percentage that is provided to them. Because again, this is an investigative tool.
Thank you.
Hope that answers.
All right.
Norman Mantle again. Ask the Kansas Highway Patrol about this issue, how they've been misused. They are misusing it, and they banned them. KDWPT is in the process of banning these cameras because they're being misused. They're in the process of getting these cameras banned. You will use them you will misuse them. You'll stop them for legitimate use, but then you'll use it for something else because, oh, this come up on the screen. You better check about your accuracy. Legal issues have been raised before about this, especially in western Kansas. Somebody comes from another state, they just come across the state line, just, we run a camera on him, we gotta stop him. You're opening up a can of worms.
I guess just as a related follow-up question to that, is there any plan to review, let's just say quarterly data for right now, with the Citizens Law Enforcement Board or other agencies just to kind of publicly, just
that isn't
update on
something
how
that
it's
actually
working?
I had thought about, but I actually think that is something that certainly we could discuss with them with regards to reviewing the policy, number one, and also some of the auditing that we're doing with regards to the system and what our findings are. I like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. It doesn't look like any hands are still raised online and no one coming forth to the stage. So bring it back to the commissioners for any action.
Mayor Davis, I move we approve a motion authorizing the city manager to sign a 3-year service agreement with Flock Group Incorporated, doing business as Flock Safety for the installation and leasing of 22 fixed automated license plate readers in the amount of $169,950.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to authorize the city manager to sign a 3-year service agreement with Flock Group Incorporated for the installation and leasing of 22 fixed automatic license plate readers in the amount of $169,950. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you for hanging on and spending part of the afternoon with us. Appreciate it, Hector.
Stay warm. I was in Kansas recently and was definitely have a good one.
All righty, 6.3.
Item 6.3, review the 2021 audit report from Gordon CPA.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
I am Rick Welch, the Deputy Director of Finance, and today I bring the 2021 City of Salina Audit Report to you for review and to receive. Before I turn it over to Sean Gordon of Gordon CPA, I first would like to recognize Debbie Pack, Director of Finance, as well as Rachel McDaniel, City Accountant, who put in a lot of time and effort to make the audit happen this year. They're both back behind me here. The city received an unqualified opinion, meaning the auditors are satisfied with the city's financial reporting, and it is presumed to be free of material misstatements. The most notable sections of the audit is the auditor's opinion, where the auditor states their opinion of the financial statements, management's discussion and analysis, which highlights the activity of the year, the financial statements, and the notes to the financial statements. The city is also subject to a federal single audit due to having expenditures of a federal grant over $750,000. That report begins on page 122. And at this time, I will have Sean Gordon of Gordon CPA talk a little bit more about the audit.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. As Rick said, my name is Sean Gordon with Gordon CPA. We did perform the 2021 audit of the city. A couple things I just wanted to point out, some highlights. The basic financial statements of the city are in the report that was in your agenda packet. Those start on page 16 and 17. Page 16 is what's typically called the balance sheet, and page 17 is the income statement. This is all activity, all assets, liabilities, revenues, and expenditures of the city and its component units presented on these pages as well. Page 32 is the start of the section called the Notes to the Financial Statements. Here you'll find information on city's accounting policies, long-term debt information, involvement in the Capers retirement program, capital asset information. Quite a bit of information discussed here, and this details the dollar amounts that are presented throughout the city's financial statements. And then finally, Rick mentioned this as well. We performed also a single audit of the city due to those federal grant expenditures. For 2021, we audited the Emergency Solutions Grant. Now, this grant money was kind of expanded in 2021 due to COVID funding that the city received. Here, we also issued an unmodified opinion on that grant, which again is the highest and cleanest opinion we can give the city. So this shows that the city met all federal and state requirements concerning the accounting and financial management of that specific grant. We had two auditors' recommendations to communicate, and that was in your agenda packet as well. So if you have any questions on any of that, feel free to let me know.
Commissioner Ryan?
No questions, thank you.
Just have a general question. As an auditor, is it in your purview to mention what you might perceive as negative trends, even if the accounting principles are adhered to well, or is that opinion you try to stay away from?
No, that's a conversation that we feel comfortable having. And you know, looking back over this audit, I don't recall any conversations such as that. Like I said, we did have the two audit recommendations, but those are, I guess, of the three levels of recommendations that we can make, it's the least to worry about, right? So those are just specific things that happen. But trends or anything like that, nothing to communicate to the mayor and commission members.
Thank you.
Just for the listeners at home, and not to be too cryptic about the audit recommendations,
Yes.
you might just go ahead and
Yeah,
and
so
touch on
there
those.
were so for the audit, we randomly select 25 credit card transactions for the entire year and look at those 25 to make sure that they meet the city's credit card policy. We noticed a few, and I didn't write down the number, but there were a few that had some sales tax that were paid on those credit card transactions. We just always recommend that if the city doesn't need to be paying sales tax, they don't pay sales tax. The second recommendation had to do with an authorized signer that's listed on one of the city's bank accounts. It's a former employee that is no longer with the city, and his name just needs to be removed from that signature card on that bank account. So again, nothing major. That we see these consistently. No big surprises in those two recommendations.
All right. Any questions? I'm sorry, the presentation is probably not over yet.
Thank you, Sean. On those two comments, both of them have been addressed by the accounting department and will be monitored going forward.
Okay.
So there is no physical impact in receiving the 2021 audit report, and there are three options before you. Number one, move to receive the 2021 audit report. Number two, move to receive the 2021 audit report with amendments that the City Commission deems appropriate. And number three, postpone the receipt of the 2021 audit report to a specific date and time and give staff direction on additional information requested. And I also stand for questions.
Just one comment and then one question. One of the things I was interested in, wanted to make sure we still had that former Schilling Air Force Base environmental dollars sitting out there in a separate account, because that's 66 million is a fairly substantial amount. So,
it is.
And the other thing is, I told Rick I was going to ask him, because one of the things is we've done a really good job with our general fund balance. And I asked which one of these three wanted to take credit for it, because it continues to improve. But could you explain the unreserved general fund balance of 18.8 versus the gap fund balance of 21?
Yes.
Because I like the 21 better, but I guess 18 is the number I have to use. So
The city is a cash basis, so we will, if you were to ask me, I would say it was 18.8 million. We do have to present also on GAAP, which also recognizes future expenses as well as future income. If you take that into effect as well, that number turns to 21 million.
So basically, for our benefit, when we're looking at where we are from a financial standpoint, the 18.8 is what we should use when we're moving forward. So, as a city, we should be excited about where we're at, because we really have a $10 million goal, or when we do our budgeting, we have a $10 million target, and it wasn't that many years ago that we were at $7.5 million and weren't sure how to get to the 10. So some COVID dollars have obviously helped with that, but I think we've done, and again, part of it's being understaffed, but all in all, I think the city's done a good job, and I think some of these dollars can help us in the future to reduce the need to maybe lean on the property tax in the next year or two. So anyway.
Along those lines, when we talked about the pay plan, it gave us enough capacity to make that decision versus having little to no capacity and not being able to react or kind of work our way into it. Having that cash position really kind of changes some of the planning and the decision making that we can make, and then as we discussed, property tax assessed values are pretty unpredictable. They're pretty flat typically, so it gives us just a little bit more ability to react versus be painted into a corner.
And part of what we're, as a community, should be excited about, we're seeing growth in jobs, which should bring additional individuals to our community, which will help our sales tax revenue. So, and again, the other thing is we can't, just because we're at 18 million, we can't go out and spend it, because I think, didn't we say that the pay plan and increased employment or employees that we need would be, what, $1 million increase to our budget annually or something?
Correct.
So, got to keep that in mind also, so. But anyway, so.
Mayor, to your prior question, in addition to an audit, another document that we receive annually is a comprehensive annual financial report, and that can speak more to some of the trends that you're talking about. It looks like Debbie's waving one around in the background there. Debbie, do you want to add anything in that regard?
The only thing, Debbie Pack, Director of Finance, the only thing I was going to add to that question is, and from Sean's point of view, is as the auditors are going through the audit and having been through these for a long time, if they see those trends, they'll question us. So if they see something that last year we spent $100,000 on and this year we've spent $500,000 on, those are questions they're going to ask us about, and they're going to ask us to explain those things. So it's not like they're going to bring them to us and say, oh, this is really going down, but they are questioning those things. So if our revenue in specific areas are going down or our expenses are going up, those are things that they do recognize because they compare those from year to year, and they will ask us for explanation, and we'll then, if our explanation is good, they're obviously going to accept that or, do that. But those are things that they do look at from that perspective. The other thing to your fund balance question that I was going to mention was, I believe, and Mike might be able to back me up on this, when Moody's looks at our fund balance and gives us a credit rating, they're looking at the GAAP fund balance. So that's a number that they ask us all the time, is at the end of the year when we don't have our financials, I can tell them we have $18 million, but I'm not sure what that GAAP number is going to be. But it's typically about the same. So they do take that into consideration when they're looking at our ratings over the years. And then the only other point I was going to make is that $18 million, we made a commitment through strategic planning, and I had to bring the list, to set aside some of that funding for specific things. So those are things that next year, when we look at strategic planning, we'll look at those things. And the $1 million was for the pay plan. To the sales tax economic fund, we supported that a little bit more this year in 2022. So we're seeing some of those expenses that we committed last year through strategic planning that'll come out of that fund balance in 2022. However, sales tax is up, so we're going to hope that fund balance does go up a little bit more this year. So.
And it's not really a question or anything, but just as an overall thought from a city commissioner, I want to say thank you to our finance department. I feel like we have an excellent staff now, and I think some of the reports we're getting that help us make decisions as commissioners is greatly appreciated, and appreciate all you guys do. So thank you.
Definitely second that. So,
I think staff interrupted your commissioners. I'm not sure everybody got an opportunity to speak. I apologize for the interruption.
Nope. I guess I wasn't exactly sure when we were done, but it looks like no one else is running to come back up front.
If you want to go through this line by line, you're on your own.
Right. So we are ready for action then.
Unless there's other questions, I think that's where Mike was going. Wasn't sure if everybody got
I'm not sure all the commissioners got an opportunity. I think we jumped in the middle of that.
All right, we are ready for act. All right, any action to be taken?
Comment?
I thought I did, but I'll offer it again. Anyone from the public have any comments? And no one on line with their hand raised? All right. Any action to be taken?
And Mayor Davis, I move we receive the 2021 audit report.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to receive the 2021 audit report. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Is there any other business? No. All right. We will move to Citizens Forum, which is an opportunity to address the commission on any topic of your choice. We'd like you to keep the running clock in mind, just as a general guide. Anyone who wishes to come? Don't jockey to be last, because that door will close.
Mark Labus. Mr. Trent Davis, you had mentioned, I was here it would have been a couple months ago, that you had mentioned that we could email commissioners. Well, I attempted to do that. There's at least 2 commissioners on this panel that your emails are invalid. I believe Mr. Ryan and Mr. Lungbein's emails are inaccurate, according to the city's website. In addition to that, what puzzled me, even prior to that, was why the city parks were paying for a business for profit, paying for their sign. Well,
can you be a little more specific?
When Parks and Recreation came up here, this would have been about a couple months ago, and mentioning that updating park signs and also mortuary signs, or cemetery signs, one of them being Ryan Mortuary. It did not dawn on me at that point in time, Mr. Ryan happens to own that. Why are we paying a profit? Why are we, the taxpayers, paying for a private business's sign?
If
Why?
you're talking about the signs at the cemetery.
Yep.
It's because we own the cemetery.
Okay. But
I mean, it's open to any
right.
undertaker.
I
but,
get that
yeah.
to an extent, but I also know that we didn't need to update it either. But I know that goes with Ryan Mortuary.
Well, just to be clear, there's no signage associated with Ryan Mortuary that the city's paying for. Our signage is at the city-owned and operated cemetery, designating it as a cemetery. And as part of our strategic planning, we identified road improvements, pavement. There was a shelter that had a tree fall on it, and we're reworking the entrance and the I don't know how old that initial sign is, but we're dealing with it like any other capital improvement in our system.
Yeah. Well, I think we could have used the money elsewhere better, but I know at least 2 of your guys' emails are invalid, so.
We'll check into that. Thank you.
Ben Winholt, Salina. First off, I want to give a great attaboy to the downtown Salina for the Parade of Lights that happened Saturday. To Mayor Davis, I think you might have been over-exaggerating 4 to 5 miles an hour, because we were entry number 80, Thursday night cruisers, you're entry number 91, and we weren't doing 4 or 5 miles an hour, guarantee it. As a clutch car, my clutch got one heck of a workout, which does every parade that I do there. So there's no way I can keep it in first gear and maintain a speed that I have to slow down. So that being said, the reason I'm up here, on November 15th, there was a media story about the event. Now, before I get into the event, I want it known that I am not against anything happening in Salina as far as an organization putting something together and bringing dollars to Salina. In no way I'm against that. What I want to address, though, is the Salina Crossroads Marathon. The Visit Salina, which is a division of the Chamber of Commerce, estimated that and this was in the story, that the economic impact from this one single event was $446,296. Okay, they also ran the numbers, the Salina Marathon ran the numbers, there were 817 registered participants with 30 states represented. To do either a full marathon, a half marathon relay, a 4.1K family fun run, or a marathon relay. If you do those numbers of 817 divided into their economic impact number, that comes out to be $546 for every man, woman, and child that participated in one of 5 of the different aspects of the marathon. So maybe Commissioner Hoppick, who is part of and evidently has a deep passion for the Chamber of Commerce, can explain how this impact amount came to be. trying to make citizens believe that this event had every runner or walker spend $546 in Salina due to this event on that day is kind of hard to fathom. Even with bringing families, say, from the 30 states and staying up in a motel room, a lot of these participants were local participants and children, full families, and there's no way that a family of 4, 2 kids, and they're going to spend $546 times 4 basically on this event. So I don't know if the Chamber of Commerce likes to put out these numbers to pad their resume on what they think they're doing for Salina, or where do you come up with such a number? I mean, I don't understand $446,000.
Have you contacted the Visit Salina and asked them?
How about what?
Have you contacted Visit Salina and asked them how they calculated that?
No, I did not.
That would
I'm
probably
coming to you because
I'm not on this Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, well, you had a passion for them.
I still do. I still think they do a good job.
Personally, you had the passion for them.
I'll be glad to call them for you.
Well, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could come up, how they come up with that.
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
usually have a formula and stuff. I don't. Yeah.
yeah.
We'll ask.
I don't know. $546 a person is awful high.
All right. Anyone else? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn?
I'll second that.
Well, that was a long second coming. Okay.
No, just-
All in favor for adjournment, say aye.
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 Okay, thank you. All right, we are adjourned.